Yeah, so I wanted to start with just everyone else's saying like what jumped out to them because I it was only 10 pages or like 15 or something. It wasn't that long. Like with people saying bringing their own questions or like things that they wanted to discuss further before I kind of like jump into the questions and things that I had. So anyone wants to jump in here and just, say what stood out to you, what intrigued you, or what like, compelled you to write it down or anything like that.
Yeah, for me, I think two things. It was quite an interesting chapter. I think I had quite a bit of questions or things that I feel will be answered as to go along. But I mean, first of all, the points in the chapter is discussing biological determinism
Mm-hmm.
as applied in the in the Western from the Western lens. And should I say viewpoint, which is which is another thing about like that
Mm-hmm.
strikes the idea of view, the view,
Mm-hmm.
vision being the way the world is supposed to be understood. Um, and so we talk about viewpoints and worldview and such. But yeah, so um, but then you have those who now understand social construction or um, to be the reasons why you have categories rather than them being biologically determined. But then, the author says, that social construction is still within that framework of biological determinism. It doesn't escape it. I wasn't quite clear. So, at what point do you escape it? And even she starts by talking about Marxism,
Mm-hmm.
managing to try to get out of it, but then still being stuck in it. But there was no further elaboration, so I couldn't quite understand that. So,
Mm-hmm. Even me myself,
uh,
like this is like the second and a half or third time I'm reading this book, and like I still have it gives me more questions than answers because I was really like confused, like not like confused, but like wanting to know more because I'm like as like similar to your own like confusion. I'm like so if biology like what she's arguing is that at least from my view, is that we can't like escape biology because of like the biological facts being invented to back up the social construction. They're kind of like feeding on each other like that in that like base superstructure kind of way. So at what point, like even the like how do we get away from that's why the first time I read it I was like the conclusion is we just have to like abolish gender, we just have to get rid of it because there's just no way, like there's no way we can get out of this like using the view, using the body as a way of like differentiating and establishing hierarchy. So anyway, I'm going to move to the next slide. um So one thing she said was, since like for a while now, I don't know if she said from the beginning of time, people in power go about establishing their superior biology. So I just wondered, like, how do they? I just thought it would be an interesting question. How do those in power go about establishing their superior biology? And I guess for what like purpose? White supremacy comes to mind. White bodies come to mind, and like, obviously I know what like purpose that is, but um, to conquer and to dominate. But I guess any that kind of it jumped out to me. Those in power, sorry, those in power, really like establishing like superior biology. Like biology isn't as apolitical as we would like it to be. So yeah, I guess anyone else have any thoughts on that? If there's
Can I speak?
yes, yes, please.
Okay, yeah, I was going to read this part, as what jumped out to me, when you asked that question,
Oh,
but I guess you didn't take all of the, you didn't take others, like
oh, sorry.
though I didn't, no, I didn't signify, so I understand. So, well, I was going to talk about the question you posed just now. I mean, where it says that, where it's, the sentence that comes after that, where it says those who are different are seen as genetically inferior, and this in turn is used to account for their disadvantaged social positions. So, I think how, the question, how do those in power go about establishing their superior biology? I think it comes from, yeah, like you said, white supremacy. And if you look at the history of those white supremacists and their role in Africa and how they force, their Western thoughts and people, even in our education, it is evident. It is the Western, biological understanding that is, rolling over the thought, and that informs the ideology. And you see where, a country like Nigeria, where we have, gay being, seen as inferior or like an abomination, things like that. So I think, this, like, Oyeronke said in is it the preface that, this is to, expose, the dangers of biological determinism and how it helps to construct, society, even though some people, claim that they are divorced from each other, but, there is no divorce here. It's like, it's more like, gender, inform social constructions, like people's ideology and gender inform social construction. So like we've seen, in the present day, we see that those who, fall into this category of, Western explanation of biology. Like I mean, there's some white males explanation because I'm trying to be, objective, not to like generalize, because I want to believe that that is not the way, white males in general. I mean, like before recent times, I don't think that's how everything was constructed, But with power comes from the thought of those who, acquire those powers. So, if you look at Africa with, colonial puppets everywhere. So we see that they just advance this Western thought, and that is what we've seen happen in, Nigeria, putting gender in question. The clamp down on those who are not seen as, superior gender, like gay people, for example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. That's so true. Like well, I don't give white people the benefit of the doubt. I don't see why we have. I'm so serious. I don't see why we like. I was just thinking about this morning. How, and like there's this filmmaker Kathleen Collins. She talks about it. How people who are like oppressed, or Africans or Black people, whatever, like you can't get away from either being saint or sinner, and somehow either you have to now occupy this sort of like exalted position of being like almost like almost like love the oppression, not love your oppression, obviously, but almost like love the position of being oppressed to the extent that it kind of like it kind of like you turn into sort of like an oppressed saint. Now you have to sort of like people now come to you for kind of like an absolution. Like everyone, everyone can point to Black and be like, yes, Black is Black is the most oppressed. We can, everyone in the world, the Arabs, like every Asian, like everyone can agree. And so like now we have to be these saints, and we have to be like forgiving, and like, no, fuck all of that. Like, no, we don't have to do that. We don't have to put ourselves in that position of objectivity. And even there's this thing in Fanon where he says for the colonized, objectivity is always weaponized against them. Like we don't have to do that. Like he was talking in a different context about journalists, but I feel like it's saying like we don't have to like they weaponize objectivity against us like that. Anyway, sorry, off topic. Anyone else wants to contribute before I move on? It's 6 people here now, so. Anyone wants to? Okay, no, I'll move on to the next slide.
Hello.
Hello, yes, we can hear you.
I just talk about give my response to the question. Oh, can you clearly? Hello.
Hello, yeah, I can hear you. We can. Hello, yeah, I can hear you. We can.
Should I go on? Hello.
Hello, yes. Hello, yes.
I'm yeah. From my own perspective, or let me say for what I've read and in my own understanding, I feel like there's nobody want to talk about the power behind the establishment of superior biology in the context of Western society, because we need to understand that in Western society there is this objectivity of trying to use the body, to categorize people, and in this how do I say hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. And also they use in terms of biological terms to use in the what we call hierarchy formations of the society. For instance, now you see like in Western Europe, there's this belief or myth whereby you feel like white male child are ordained to be kings and things like that. So the women are just like a subordinate of the body, and the man himself. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Can you guys proceed? Can you proceed, please? Hello.
Well, we can hear you. You're good to go.
I know.
I'm not sure what's happening. Is there a? Let me see if he fell off. Nope, still here. I'm just gonna show in the air. I feel like they always do it through violence. Like it's never like that's the thing that makes this whole thing so unsettling. Like this whole because she goes on how she talks about it's also like historically and culturally bound gender. Like they always establish this through violence, like through bloodshed. Like there's no. It's always a bloody affair. That's so upsetting. Anyone else wants to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to buttress on what Adebayo was saying before he asked to be excused for a while. I think what he was saying was he was talking about how those in power go by establishing their superior biology, making even political position hereditary or specific to a particular gender. Like, for instance, like male people should occupy, or black males or white males, whoever is in power will, subscribe to this ideology should, enforce a kind of male dominance. Like you have to have a male prince, a male king, male this, male that, all of that. Like a kind of a male dominated, or kind of like in terms of feudalism, like hereditary positions for male. Like if you're a male child, you qualify to success, or take after the throne once your parents are gone, something like that. And for the female, it is not always the same. And just to kind of agree more with Oyeronke, like the Igbo tribe, for example. I think Comrade Shango mentioned this during the last session, where even now some Igbos will tell you that the female child do not have any rights to the property of a parent. That it is only a male child who has access to that. But if you look at pre-colonial history, this is not the truth. These are Western ideology, infiltrating our culture, influencing our culture, and changing the norms or what we used to have, and really packaging it for us, like inferior, substandard truth. I don't know if that's right to use, like if you get what I mean. So so we have to. That's one of the ways those people enforce their biological ideology on culture and like cultural imperialism. I think biological ideology in terms of biological determinism also influences this area as well. Yeah,
it's so pervasive. This whole thing is so insidious. It's everywhere. You cannot get away from the violence of like biological determinism or the violence of gender. How shall we ever overcome? Sorry to be so pessimistic, Michelle. Anyone else wants to contribute before I move on to the next slide? So violent. No, okay, let me move on. Why do you think we have to get to the root of what determines difference and hierarchy in a colonized society? I can't remember why I wrote this question. Let me look at my notes, because I was taking notes when I was reading. I think, like, especially in our own society, there's a lot of like people obviously live in like the violence, so we have our own like analysis, and so like people will be like tribalism or religion or patriarchy or misogyny, like so many, there's just so many things out there. But like, why is it important? Like, why is she trying to get to the root of biological determinism? Like, why is it important that we get to the root of it? To be honest, like, we could be satisfied with like trying to reform gender, like with trying to teach men how to be better or trying to create safe spaces for women. But like, why doesn't reform work? What's hindering progress? Because Western feminists have been theorizing about this for centuries, if not more. So why do you guys think we have to get to the bottom of what determines difference and hierarchy in our society today?
Okay. Well, what I think, is, majorly for me, I think, if we want to address this, there's no way we are not going to see how biological determinism, also, plays a role in terms of, how it informs religion as a whole, and I think the reason why, in my opinion, except we have power, like we take power, like to kind of, change people's understanding, right from the top, to influence the educational system, even, how to infiltrate even religion itself, because religion plays a role in this, because there is nothing, the most educated people, the so-called people who claim to be educated, as educated as they are, they believe that the Bible or the Quran is the word of God, and the family pyramid, the man is above the woman and all of that. So it doesn't allow them to question, the concept of gender, whether this is right or this is wrong. They just believe that in as much as this book, that is considered as sacred, and the word of God, has told them that, a man, is supposed to be the head, the woman is a lower gender, is inferior to the man, that kind of a thing, unless we, tear this whole system down, I don't think there is a way we can reform, this concept of gender. And to quickly, let me see, what's the question again? Yeah, why we have to get to the roots, is just to give the people an historical understanding of where all of this comes from, what informs all of these concepts, social construction and all that, like to give them an understanding of where it stems from, and that this has not always been, the way things are being organized. So, if we go back to the roots, I think, like what we are doing here, this is kind of a new information for a lot of us, even myself, and I think if this can go for a while, because we're addressing the roots right here, so I think it would help, we educate the public and get them to have a new information, understanding about, concept of hierarchy in a society. Yeah.
Interesting. Anyone else?
I have my hand raised up, comrade. Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm in a train, so it's a bit noisy. I hope it doesn't bother you too much. I was gonna just contribute to what Comrade Adeyinka was saying, specifically regarding education. So from my own analysis anyway, I think even the idea, the concept of education needs to be challenged. It needs to be questioned, right? Because a lot of times we kind of mythicize it and make it seem like, it's the end. Once you acquired certain skills and certain things, then you're educated, whereas it's not necessarily so. It just means you've learned to do things. So even that idea of education deserves its own challenge. You say we should smash hierarchy and gender and family, and I'm saying that needs to be extended to the idea of education. Thank you.
Yes, I definitely agree with both of you.
Yeah, I agree as well.
But like, I guess like, I don't know what I'm trying to say here exactly, but this book, like, I think this book is helpful in the fact that it's like it exposes the things we take for granted about gender in our society. But today, gender is very much alive and well. It's very like it's like the rules of gender still very much apply. Like we don't live like this is decolonial work that we're doing and she's doing, but we do not live in a decolonial society. You don't even live in a society that's like moving towards like decolonialism. Like we live in an actively colonized society. And um, that's why I think what Joy James offers in the terms of what is, it's not about gender, it's about function. And interrogating what is the what is the function of gender in our society, and challenging those functions at the root. I think people might be persuaded more to reconsider their notions. I mean, today people might be considered to reconsider their notions of gender if they thought about how it functions in their lives, and how gender becomes a barrier to becomes a barrier to the actual conditions that people live. Becomes, you know, it becomes almost like obsolete. I was watching a video of women in Chad, and because they have the issue with the lake drying up and the river drying up, I was watching them. These women had with children on their back, just hoeing the land with, you know, with an actual, with, you know, a weapon. They were just a tool, not a weapon. I'm sorry. They're just hitting the sand, the ground, and that is antithesis. That is, you know, contradictory to the idea of what a woman should be and what a woman should do. Like there is no space for gender binaries in our society with this much work to be done. I'm so sorry. Like there's no space for hand holding men and their egos. There's no space for you know, hesitating on the truth, or having a weird idea of what women should be or what men should be. There's no time for that in the face of social and death. In the face of death, there's not a time for that. And I think forcing people to consider the function might change, but as far as them, as, as far as the place of this book, to be honest, now these days I'm conflicted. I think the book could be great for showing people that we lived, you know, hierarchies or lack of hierarchies or difference in society doesn't have to look like this. But I don't know that we can. I do want to abolish gender, but I'm just concerned and thinking of it in terms of the today, in the terms of the right now, what's, you know, like actual people's lives today, not, you know, not merely an abstraction. But yeah, that's just what I'm just thinking about as everyone is speaking. Yeah. Anyone else before we move to the next slide?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I want to put my own view. Should I go on?
Yes, please.
Yeah, first of all, looking at the question, the reason why we're actually treating the issue of gender determinism is because why, you know, half of the world is being colonized by the West, and it is part of the how I say it, the collapse of Western civilization. Gender has now become a typical issue we are all discussing. Because from my own perspective, I feel like, you know, Oyewumi distinguish between the understanding of worldview and world sense. So, you know, Western view is worldview, and what we are actually trying to say is actually trying to hear is world sense. In the aspect is that, you know, we are just trying to just like trying to understand that there is a culture, there's a civilization that we have before we've been colonized. So from that aspect, we are actually trying to use our own history to justify our society, like trying to identify the differences between a colonial society and a society that existed before the Western invaded us. And in our own society, realize that, you know, sexism, gender was not that pivotal, or was not that pervasive in our society, because we realize that, you know, men and women, you know, have the role that they played. And in let me say in African society, let me say indigenous society, age plays role. And there must have been some what's it called, some arguments that, you know, patriarchy happened in Africa or in indigenous society, whereby because majority of the rulers in Africa were men. But people are actually seeing it from the sense of Western critics, because they are not actually trying to study the social relation of the society at that time. And like Oyeronke said, the Western people always try to identify things based on body. They were only trying to identify, the body perception of of the male ruling. They try to understand African society from their own perspective, or from their own cultural understanding of what society is when male play dominant role, or when male hold positions. Like what's it called? Oyewumi said, like in Greece, women were not seen as citizens. Women were seen as as subordinate of citizens, like the males. People, the males at that time, the men were the real citizens, and they were myths. This like Greek myth that states that there are different kinds of people in society. Those who were made of gold, those who were made of silver, and those who were made of bronze and iron. But women were not being categorized under that catalog. Women were seen as wood, and wood means they are more, I say, more inferior, or less of what men should be in society. And also, this is also part of the reason we colonize people. Let me say colonize people, to be able to understand that we have our own system, and it is also part of what I witness said, that if you try to 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 view development of a society based on economic perspective, or not, and not understanding the social relation. So it's part of the social relation that shows that African civilization, where women play a good role, where women are seen as equal, from that perspective. So for also me, I feel like one of the main reasons we are actually treating this is because Western civilization is gradually destroying the world. And women, I don't want, sorry for using the word women, the women are more getting educated, and they understand that the Western civilization itself was being created and was being coined by men. So and there's no way we want to talk about feminist resistance in the West without not outlining the role slaves, or let me say the Marons that came from the Caribbean down to America, you know, during the slavery time, or let me say during the war, during what's it called, um, uh, the revolutionary upliftment of the black people in America. We see ourselves like women play so much role, in fighting against slavery, and at that time. So at that time, the women in American society at that time was saying that women were actively doing things they can do. So in that aspect, they try to learn from our own culture and see, and follow in the footstep of what African people can do, because we know that it was up to the 20th century women have power to participate in politics, or even have the right to vote. And it was part of what's it called, the upliftment of social equality between men and women, which encompasses both the black women and the white women. And at that time, the black women played a lot of role in what we know as Western feminism today. But it has been whitewashed, and it has been whitewashed to the extent that feminism today has been seen as liberalism, whereby a lot of people are not trying to question even roles, even subjugative roles feminists played against fellow women. In society, Western feminism always want people to, be in same position as men, or same position as women. But only same position as women give you that criteria of even exploiting your same fellow gender. So if you are fighting for the upliftment of the women in general, then it's not about taking same position as men. It's about restructuring the social settings of what gender, sexism, things like that are done in our own society. And on the issue of hierarchy, which I wanted to point out, is that the fight between gender is not all about hierarchy, or who is going to hold the position, or who is going to set the template of how society needs to be run. But for me, I feel like, in trying to bring society into balance, both two genders need to play the role in trying to make this into balance, because we also need to understand that the system in place is the one psychologically breeding, nurturing people into patriarchy beliefs. And sometimes I feel like even men as well who fall under this patriarchy benefits, how I say it, are born into it, and it's just like sometimes I argue to people like some whites are not racist, but some whites want the benefit of being whites. So we have to understand that in trying to actualize this issue of gender, a lot of men don't really feel as if they are superior, but some certain men just want the benefit of being superior. So if actually we can actually look towards what we can actually do in breaking the system, like it just said, the education system too is also play a vital role, because even in Nigeria up to today, they still teach in schools like men are the breadwinner, women are the homemaker, things like that. So those are the kind of education that built our society, but to the extent that men started feeling inferior and feeling superior about themselves, about the role they have to play in society. And sometimes men try to use concept of organs and body, all I say, body nature in terms of masculinity to judge their superiority, things like that. So that's my own submission for now. I hope you guys had all I said. Sha. Hello?
Yes, we did. Anyone else?
Hello?
Yes, we heard everything you said. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide now. Oh, I feel like we already talked about this. That's a mistake. Why does looking at the body invite one to distinguish producing the other? This was like something that she talked about in the book, how this gaze, this obsession with the body, like all I was thinking about is just, all I was thinking about when I was rereading it is just how, first of all, one of the things that when I started like, even since I was little, just being curious about is the way that we dressed, like pre-colonially, how there wasn't really shame about the body, how you can see quote unquote naked women or men, in certain pictures or things of that nature, and even how they just tie the wrappers and they just tie them, and that's their content, and the body is adorned, even though if her claim is that physical bodies aren't always social bodies, but the body was still adorned. But I would say there's a difference in the way that we treat our bodies now, and the way that, at least from the perception from just like historical documents or things of that nature, of how the body was treated then. And I guess I'm just curious about what is this obsession with the body, and why does, because you can look at the body and well, if not, if I was if I was a white supremacist or if I was anti-black, then I'd look at, and if I had that, if I had that intention or that goal to oppress based on body, then I'd look at the body and I'd distinguish. But is there no hope for the body? Like, can't we look at the body and see similarities? Because she talks about that further in the book, how it's more similarities, the distinctions, that the differences that the West makes between male and female anatomies are really minuscule, they're really small, they're limited to reproduction. And what does that have to do with areas that doesn't affect reproduction? So I'm just curious what everyone else thinks about this obsession the West has with the body, and how she talks about this gaze that invites one to distinguish instead of finding similarities. What are, I guess, other things? What's the barrier in our way? What's stopping us from acknowledging the so-called differences that we have, in terms of gender in this instance, how very limiting they are. Yeah, that kind of like, I've kind of been obsessed with that since I've been rereading this obsession that the West has with the physical body in the social realm, as she puts it. So I wanted to hear everyone else's thoughts, I guess.
Yeah. If I can come in, I think for me, I would actually like an answer to this question because I'm not so sure it is so clear the fact that making vision or seeing primary leads you to have to differentiate, because even
Right.
placing the body at the level of importance,
Mm-hmm.
having doesn't mean you come up with those categories of
Right.
differentiation like male bodies, female bodies. I mean, the bodies all look the same, really. I mean, you could, or white bodies, black bodies, rich bodies, poor bodies. I mean, you could just otherwise also just have simply bodies and, you know, understand they're all the same. So,
Yeah, like I
well,
feel like
I mean,
I'm confused about that as well. But I feel like if we're from this perspective as Africans, then I guess maybe we're not going to see it the way they see it. Like, because they're the ones who make these differences, who distinguish based on bodies. We might not subscribe to that, but in terms of gender, we do differentiate in terms of body. I mean, you say bodies are all the same, and they are, but the moment that a quote unquote man starts wearing, starts 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 wearing, different ways, or starts looking differently, if the man doesn't present his body in the way that we're supposed to, then alarms go off, right? Then there's a crisis. Now everyone is, in trouble. Now that they're passing laws, they're homophobic. So I mean, I'm struggling with it too. The claim of the body being, or using the visual, or because I'm struggling with it as well. But I mean, they're like real life consequences to this. I don't know if this is big. Anyone else can talk. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, and I think because I think we might have to take a step backwards to asking why the body is made so primary, and why the male body, and even in this case why you see other categories, because you see this all comes to the idea of vision, and she talks about the author talks about science participating in this, and this is quite important, even in the question of the world view, in science, and in the question of vision and seeing and even doing science, it has come to be understood that you have perspectives in which you view things. You can't view things from one perspective and claim it is the superior perspective. And then also the things that you supposedly see are concepts and are constructs. You don't just see, and it's not just what your eye is communicated to your eye. Seeing is based up on the powerful creating categories. So, I mean, why else would you, for example, now, we can say now that Europeans could see very well. They can see difference. Then, but they didn't create this. It takes, the function of race to come about during slavery, for example, and exploitation, to start to create race to the extent to which they did. So the scene comes as for me, as a result of a necessity or to serve a function. So you can just create in anything, anything you see, and sometimes that's why we have you know two people can see the same thing and and be seeing different things. So uh, well, in this kind of viewpoint that is being put here, it is a viewpoint of that doesn't respect perspective. You know that, I mean, that's the viewpoint that dominated the Western science for a long time. You know, actually, it's a viewpoint that
Wait, sorry, what do you mean by it doesn't respect perspective? Like it doesn't respect individual perspective, or if you could just
yes, it's um it puts a dominant perspective and forces everybody to adhere to it. So um, you know, like you say, this is something like, for example, that like Nietzsche was tackling in a lot of his work, the issue of Western science and Western view being, you know, some powerful. Let's put it this way: a powerful class or group of people tell you that this is the perspective that matters in when you see something. So again, this also refers to context, because perspective and context are similar in a sense. So of course, you know, it negates context. It doesn't take account of you know, the environment in which you know, I don't know. I don't want to get lost.
like,
Then
no, are
let's
you
come
saying,
back to
like, no, I think
like,
no, this is important because are you saying like the gaze, it doesn't respect the gaze of the person who is doing the gazing, who is doing the looking? It's just saying, speaking broadly, that the gaze invites one to, yeah, the person who is gazing to distinguish. Is that, am I mis saying you?
I'm saying that it determines what everybody is supposed to see, and how people are supposed to categorize what they see.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because people don't, you know, people see this is just, for example, you know, you are going to see some lines, and then, you know, as you grow up as a child, you're seeing some lines, you're not exactly knowing what this is. It's until somebody tells you that's a
Mm-hmm.
tree, or that's a cat, or that's, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
these are constructed. Let's be real. There's no, and I'm not saying you can do it otherwise. I'm saying there's no, you can't have
So,
something that doesn't have some level of construction. But the issue here is that there's a powerful group that determines
mm-hmm.
what is constructed. Because
Yes.
otherwise, how does everybody see the same? We don't see the same. I can't. It's not possible. I can't be on the left side and you be on the right side, and we are going to see the same thing. And we're looking down the middle. So we do construct
Mm-hmm.
analysis in what happens in terms of vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying this because this has been a debate even within science, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say that, you know, the viewpoint that the author expressed about science is very, very right. But it's not as if the viewpoint has, well, let me not use viewpoint, whatever it is, has not been unchallenged over time. It has been
Yeah.
challenged, and
Mm-hmm.
it has even this whole question of vision. That, but certainly it is right that you see that in the way of doing science, yes, there has been in Western society, and I think it is due to whatever its own, you know, characteristics in terms of whatever the basis that drives a certain direction in which it sees the world, or not. Let me not say see the world, understand the world. Is that vision, and also, you know, how do I say, put this? Things you can touch, the things you can feel, the direct senses are made primary, and then
Mm-hmm.
you, you reduce other aspects of in which you can comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this, it has been very wrong, but it has been the way the science has been led, and the whole overall understanding of things. It's like because it's very hypocritical. First of all, it says that only trust what you see, feel, touch. In
Mm-hmm.
this, it tells you that, but the reality of it, that someone is constructing what those
Mhm.
things you see, feel, touch is.
Mhm.
So it's built on the foundation of the lie. And I think, even in respects of, for example, the Greeks, it was very much because Greek society was a very slave society. It was a society that was based on a lot of exploitation. And in fact, even the idea of talking about citizens that the author talks about
Mhm.
seems to forget that, in
Mhm.
terms of saying they are male citizens and no female citizens. Maybe 5% of the population were citizens. The slaves were not considered human beings, and they were not considered citizens. They were considered for work. It was a society built on exploitation, and that
Mhm.
that led to a way of constructing the world.
Right.
And that says, this and that. This is an order, and ordering, and this is this. And in fact, the Greeks, you know, they were the philosopher people or whatever, all those people on whom a lot of these ideas came, did not believe in actual physical labor or touching anything, or they don't even care about the senses. They're like, we are superior people. I think it's talked about in the book. We are superior. So we go beyond the realm of the physical or even the realm of vision. We are rational. So they create this dichotomy, but that fits in with a superior group of people. But for everybody else, have to work within that framework. So again, it is these rational people now also now tell you that this is, yes, you are going to visualize the world this way and that way, and they construct. The reason I'm saying this is that I think there's still a step that understanding the nature of a society's level of exploitation or the way it exploits is important in understanding how it starts to create categories. And for me also, this question of vision, I don't see how you could do science without vision, or without prioritizing vision, or that to a certain extent, but that you would, it is important that who is constructing in that sense. While at the same time, of course, I think that the over focus on vision, and we find, like, for example, in societies, and I think maybe as we go ahead, yes, that this idea of a sense is that you can in- attach more importance to other senses, and I don't mean other physical senses, but in terms of more of the rational, and there's nothing that is um, vision doesn't have to be supreme in the way that it is being made in the West, which anyway, I don't. I'm getting a bit confused, but I don't. It's done in the West. I'm not, in a very, like I said, hypocritical way. It's done
Mhm.
in a to pretend that no one is actually directing um how you see, the categories that you see. So again, let me just, why does looking at the body invite one to distinguish producing the other? I don't know exactly, but for me, I don't know that looking itself invites,
Mhm.
okay, let's say looking the body. Now I can say now, okay, yes, the body. What is the body? The body is a construct, and it is in that
Mhm.
construct, inherent in that construct, that means you have to distinguish, because the reason that the construct was brought about in the first place was to distinguish between superior and inferior, between slave master and slaves, between lords and peasants and things like that. And yes, its construction naturally implies that if you have to
But
distinguish and produce the other. Yes.
I feel like, okay, this is like right apart a bit, but I feel like, yes, they did use, they do use. I feel like even like how she talks about how we cannot get away from biology. Like she says, there's a paragraph where she's like, as long as your people will still be used in groups like poor, black, slaves, you know, whatever. We're thinking of body types. Like, you cannot, like how she was saying, you cannot honestly think of the term corporate executives and not have a specific body type in mind. And when you were just right now speaking about the way you were grouping people, like slaves, non-slave, peasants, lords, we're thinking of specific body types and if those body types were not attached to power, if they're not attached to hierarchies and distinctions, then sure, it will be fine. But we don't we don't live in that society, right? Like, we live in a society where having a particular body type means something, and not having a particular body type takes away from you, or, you know, hinders your progress, or hinders what you can, if we live in a capitalist society, what you can accumulate, which is what, you know, bourgeois feminists work towards, you know, changing. And so I'm thinking this through. I'm like, if feminism is interested in changing, reforming gender, changing how women navigate the world, if it is that even possible in the face of this body reasoning or body logic that says the exact opposite? Like, I don't. And perhaps this is why, you know, that particular movement has been unsuccessful, because even when you were saying peasants, lords, we're thinking of specific, like, biology. We're thinking of specific bodies. Yeah, I like, and also I don't know that I'm holding the attention of, like, individually, but our individual, like, with the Western hegemony, like, they have a say. They says their gaze, we go by their gaze. Their gaze says to differentiate, and so we're socialized into that gaze. You're saying we look at the bodies are the same, but we're conditioned to see, to distinguish when we gaze. I feel like maybe that's why. Maybe that's why. Like, we can. And I guess that's, like, the hiccup, like she's explaining, like, the Western feminists are like, well, it's socially constructed, that means it can change. But the idea, I guess, the goal shouldn't be to constantly be reforming it, because then you can't escape biological determinism, which is based on, because basic biology, things like body parts, they're mutating, but they're not mutable. I think that's what she says. Like, you can change their meanings, but you can't change them per se. So we're just gonna keep going around in circles until we make a radical break, from just trying to reform or change our idea of what gender is. As long as it's rooted in hierarchy, or, like, ideas of biology, then we're not. I don't know. I feel like we're not going anywhere. Anyway, that's just a rant. Sorry, anyone else wants to try?
Yeah, interesting contribution so far. You know, I've been looking at this question and, like, how do I answer this? What does this mean?
Oh, yeah, by the way, no one has,
you know,
an answer. It's just for discussion purposes.
Yeah, okay. Because, you know, for me, I think once one is taught informs one's understanding of sight, you know, like, you know, we're talking about biological determinism and how some thoughts, you know, have contributed to people's, you know, ideology. And, you know, without information, you know, looking at things in binary, you understand? Like, you know, for this to exist, there's an opposite of this, you know, like, you know, that binary understanding of things. Like, okay, this is a man. Okay, let me see how I can judge, because this man is physically strong. Okay, this woman is not physically strong. You know, you just base it on that, you know, you base it on strengths, you know, to judge that, you know, for this to be strong, you know, physically, then you are not strong physically. It means that you are the opposite of that person, not knowing that strength doesn't lend itself, to just physical, your physical strength, like physicality alone, There are other areas where, strength comes in, that a man can do, a man cannot do, all this binary stuff. So I think even in terms of, social groupings, like Convention Go mentioned earlier, peasants, the poor, the corporate bodies and all of that. It's still part of, biological determinism, expanding its reach to other social areas, like, when you look at somebody, who is, in terms of material understanding of society now, like someone who is, high top at the, in a corporation, like, and someone who is below, when you look at the way they dress, the way they look, you can tell that, oh, this person is doing well. You are not doing well. It helps, that understanding of body, helps to categorize and say that, oh, you're not doing well, you are doing well, So, and normally that is not the way the society is supposed to be structured, but because of, I don't know how to, explain these thoughts, but I'm just saying that, for you to distinguish and produce in the other, it comes from the fact that you, being taught to see things in binary, that's what I'm trying to say. So.
Yeah, and which is why the binary just has to go. It just has to.
Yeah.
It just has, like, there's no reforming. There's no reforming gender. But anyway, we might have other conclusions. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just saying things. We're gonna move on to the next
Hello?
slide. Hello. Oh, someone wants
Hello.
to.
So I was talking about. Can I say something? Can I comment, please?
Yes, please.
I think for me, my own contribution will be away from the biological things when it comes to categorization of the body, because for me, I feel like it might be a later thing whereby categorization of the body was used against one another, because for me, I feel like as civilization grows, curiosity comes. People see each other and they see the differences in their bodies. In the beginning of family reunion, the savagery and the whole thing, they were people who think, and through their thinking, the curiosity comes like, you have this, I don't have this. You have that, I don't have that. So over time, when the concept of power started playing in our society, then the politicalization of what the body should be started taking place. Like, when we started, structurizing who to be in power, who not to be in power. So for me, the binary thing in some aspect itself might have had its own disadvantage, but I feel like binary understanding in the beginning might not be a way of trying to identify who is superior or who is not superior. It's just been bastardized over time. So for me, and I think that I think that the issue of body categorizing now in this present generation, or let me say in the generation whereby political structures were in place, is what we should question. And if it feels like the binary aspect or the categorization of the body is causing so much damage, then we should try to treat it. But I still feel like we should see the understanding of what the people before us were trying to do. It might just be manipulated, but the essence of binary has something. I just hope you guys can just understand what I'm trying to say, Yesha.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I just disagree. I get what you're saying. I just disagree. I don't like. It's the same. I feel like it's the same when people say capitalism is just it's destroyed it. Maybe in the beginning it wasn't so bad, and now capitalism is we can reform it, whatever, which is just nonsense. But I mean that's why I feel like is interesting of these studies, because that's why I feel like I had that question of how do they go about establishing their superior biology and for what purpose. Like, this binary was invented for a reason. It wasn't a coincidence. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly whose labor they deemed valuable and who they wanted to exploit by, producing this distinction, and by exaggerating the anatomical distinctions in the social world. Like, they knew exactly what they were doing. So I don't think it's a case of deviating from the original plan. I think the plan has been insidious from the beginning, and we should be working to abolish it. But yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. I definitely understand that. Anyone else wants to chime in? Okay. Move to the next slide. Okay. Move to the next slide. Okay. So this is a quote from /question she had in the chapter. If the social realm is determined by the kinds of bodies occupying it, then to what extent is there a social realm, given that it is conceived to be biologically determined? So the question I had was just, shouldn't the social realm be determined by social relations and not biological determinism? And I guess to an extent, now that I'm reading this, I'm like, I would say that I'd rephrase it and say, shouldn't the social realm be determined solely by social relations and not social relations and biological determinisms? Because that's another thing that she challenges in the book, is that both things can exist at the same, and probably do exist in our society at the same time. So I just want, if anyone, saw this and had any thoughts. Hold on, I'll speak at once. Hello? Me?
So if this is this, can we ask, like, is, like, I know we went to the book, still for that we'll get an answer to this, but then as she starts to talk about at the end, there are other types of societies in which sorry, maybe not at the end, because I read a little bit further, but other types of societies in which this is not the way things are done. So how can it be done otherwise, in the sense that the body does not have this kind of primacy? And certainly, well, first of all, because as she talks about the terms of those who try to discuss, like with sociology, where people try to take social relations as what should be, primary, and then he talks about somebody who laments the absence of the body in sociology. Sociology takes social relations as primary, but then she says, however, that they still comes back to body. So but certainly, well, I think the answer would be, what other types of ways are we going to be able to escape this thing? In a level of sociology that even then still tries to take social relations as primarily, still comes back to body. For me, it's still a question, trying to understand what other ways of
arranging society, I guess. If not the body, then what?
Yeah. Or what does it mean to say that social relation is what determines the social realm without any biological.
Interference. I'm just thinking that capitalism requires the binary, like colonialism requires, they can only do this whole white supremacy thing because of that, like that's their, for years they had that, claim of the inferior skull or whatever, and they've literally created, anyway, that capitalism requires it. So I really do think it's gonna take abolishing capitalism, moving forward to a society that doesn't really require this level of exploitation based on like hierarchies for us to even have that society where the body doesn't interfere, or even if it does interfere, it doesn't take this much prominence in the social realm, so to speak. I don't know why this is so low. But yeah, anyone else wants to? By the way, like no one has to have like a definitive answer. I don't have an answer. Just question for the sake of being generative, of fostering conversation. So, anyone else wants to chime in? Then move into the next slide. Okay, moving on. Gender has been ontologically conceptualized. The category of the citizen, which has been the cornerstone of much of Western political theory, was male, despite the much acclaimed Western democratic traditions. I just thought this quote was funny. Like what I understand by her saying gender has been ontologically conceptualized is that gender isn't just like salad dressing on the salad. Like gender is really much like a foundational organizing principle of our society, just as race is. Like there's no escaping gender. Gender is not something you can ignore. It's been there so much so that even the category of citizen, like someone was saying earlier, it's the description. It's very much male. It's very much man. It's very much excludes and I would say till now excludes anyone who is non-male from that description. And how can your society be democratic if you're excluding hordes of people from participating in your democracy, quote unquote? But yeah, I don't know if anyone else found this to be interesting or illuminating or funny or anything.
Well, I think I will just go back to what Comrade Shango said. When we're talking about the Greek society, question of citizens, and they're not all male as citizen, and there are the slaves are not considered as citizen. Well, I'm not sure, but from my only two understanding of that society, I may want to disagree because I think, if we look at the, well, maybe the information I have about that society may not be true, which makes me want to, disagree, but, I'll still, put it forward, so that we can discuss it. Because, if you look at, what's it called? Even, the slaves in that society, it's more or less like, except, they have a kind of a master that is extremely wicked and doesn't tolerate or, entertain the idea of freedom for male slaves, but I think that males, irrespective of their social status, are still considered citizens, but, for slaves, you have to fight for it, but it's not the same for the female. I don't know if that is correct, historically correct, but from my little information that I have, about our society. I think those who are slaves can, kind of, fight their way or buy their way out of the, slavery and become citizens. But that is not the case for female in that society. So that is why I said I kind of disagree, that not all males are citizens. I think saying that all males are citizens, I think that was correct.
Interesting. Interesting, because I wouldn't consider the categories citizen or human to be like universal categories, like like I'm thinking of that phrase that she said, when when the social realm is determined by biology. I think that we might like to think that in the ideal, or people, I don't know, people might like to think that yes, everyone is a citizen, everyone is this, or even in those times, or in this time, maybe they thought too that everyone was a citizen. But if we look at what was actually happening in those societies, like we look at the actual reality, those things, like the actual reality is in contradiction with the ideas that you say, or the things that you say your democracy is to be. Like we only see, if you only see consistently, I might add, if it's like consistently, if it's only a specific kind of body, then it's not far-fetched, or it's not a ridiculous notion to say that this very much locks certain bodies out of the conversation. This isn't what it purports to be, or what it claims to be. And I don't know, that's just how that's just how I feel. Like, obviously everyone might consider themselves to be a citizen, or consider themselves to be human, or whatever, but I don't believe those two categories to be like universal, to be as much as it's claimed to be, especially in the discourse of human rights. But yeah, anyone else has contributions about this? I tried to go through the chapter and like get all I felt like the bigger points that she was really, that makes her argument in this section. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So we go to here, and before we go to this next little section, one of the things that she talks about, yes, the body is a bedrock on which the social order is founded. One thing that like intrigued me about Western discourse is they articulate the body as, when they have the whole binary between the body and the mind, they make, they they articulate the body as the base side of human nature, because they want to escape to the mind, and they also prioritize the body at the same time. It's, I think Western philosophy is just generally stupid and silly, but that's just me. But I don't know, I'm trying to make sense of what doesn't really make any sense to me, but I just thought that was interesting. Like, why would they do that? She uses phrases like the social body, the body politic. She uses phrases, she distinguishes between worldview and world sense. Worldview, she uses it for primarily Western societies, and she uses world sense for Yoruba society. She talks about the body has an exaggerated presence in Western conceptualization of society. The binary opposition that emerged early in Western discourse. She talks about the social groups are subject, or the subject matter of the discipline are essentially rooted in biology. So there's no way to even escape that. Yeah, so those are just some things. Another like phrase that I thought was interesting, she says, no difference is elaborated without bodies that are positioned hierarchically. Like, we cannot escape differences rooted in a hierarchy. And I mean, we know from capitalism that the hierarchy exists, so people can be exploited. So anyway, I just wanted to cover, I felt like, the interesting things or things I felt were important in that first half of the first quarter, and then to this other section, social order and biology, natural or constructed. So long as the issue is difference, all biologies will be constructed to explain women's disadvantage. I feel like we already covered this a bit, just how I feel like Western biology is going to keep going round and round and round with itself. And whatever is the latest thing, it will say it can have something to attribute it to, and rooted in biology, of course. So yeah, anyone have anything to say, anything to add to this section? First. No? Okay.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello? Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, on this question, I is to buttress those who fund the narrative of what the society have to hold. I feel like the construction to explain woman disadvantage still lies under capitalism, because if capitalism not been destroyed, you had for women to have their own freedom, their own validation, because capitalism for patriarchy. So I still feel it still falls on those who write the theories we believed in, those who create, who influence our society, those we call our scholars, those we call our scientists. Majority of all these people own patriarchy views. So what for patriarchy should be what we should be killing, because as long as capitalism is still in place, patriarchy cannot be checkmate. So and patriarchy will always do things to protect its own advantage over women any time, any day, anytime. So for us, what should be driving out is to let people understand the social contradiction capitalism is fueling to suppress our women. That's my own submission. I hope you guys hear this.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think in this quote, I think it's coming in to say that we're discussing social construction, where there's been, where feminists have come and said that gender is socially constructed. You still find that biological determinism doesn't end, but basically you have they kind of reinforce one another. Biological explanations still come in. You just have new biological explanations rather than them ending, in a sense. So you have new biologies of difference. So as long as the issue is different, you always have. Is that supposed to say new biologies will be constructed? Because it says old biologies will be constructed.
Oh yeah, sorry. That's what to say, new biologies. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, which goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that that then I don't know, where do we go if social construction itself still relies on
biology,
like biologization. So I guess that's interesting, and of course I think she says, the author says that this is not a universal way of seeing the world. So again, when we come to seeing how Jesus, then you will understand it. But yeah.
Yes, definitely. We have to get away from exaggerating anatomical differences, like she says, to create social hierarchies. It's just violent and wrong. It's not coherent. It fails at so many levels. But yes, moving on. Social construction and biological determinism have been two sides of the same coin, since both ideas continue to reinforce each other. When social categories like gender are constructed, new biologies of difference can be invented. So this is just her, I guess rephrasing and restating her point in the other quote of just, they're two sides of the same coin. There's no remixing gender, because I guess the reason why she's just going on about this is because Western feminist discourse finds refuge in the idea of gender being solely socially constructed. So they can just say, yes, it's socially constructed, like we fixed the issue, like we're done. Like we can change what these mean. We can, change that. But she's like, no, these are rooted in biology. And if we're learning that biology is, to some extent, as she says, socially constructed itself, where can we go from here? So yeah, just anyone have anything to say on this? I feel like this is just making clear her point. Move on. Okay. So yeah, that was the last slide. We've come to the end of our program, people. This is the end of the show, so to speak. So I guess it was a short reading. I felt like it wasn't that difficult to get through. Anyone, any thoughts, questions, feedbacks from the presentation?
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. I mean, I've been trying to, see how, this old gender construct and, the issue of binary, how it can, be abolished or say, taught to people, and to accept this information, like how can we go about it? Like, what can be done, to, get people familiarized with this, information and get them to, change their views on gender and, hierarchy and, social construction, that, trace back to biological determinism.
I think that I may be wrong, probably am wrong, but I don't think we're going to have that much of an issue. I mean, it's going to be an issue, but I think if we're going to have an easier time in our own community versus the West, and if it's like trying to, I hate to use Christian lingo, trying to spread this gospel. I think that, and which is why I'm brought back to what Joy James says when she says it's not about gender, it's about function. I think that our society already exists outside of the binary because our material conditions stress that our conditions don't make it possible for the binary, for us to adhere to the binary as strictly in the first place. We already every day break the boundaries of the gender binary because we have to. Like, we don't have the luxury of adhering to a gender binary. I think if you illuminate that to people, then we make that clear that we're already existing as a binary. We just have to stop committing harm, causing harm, trying to reinforce what do we think we're trying to save here? We just have to try to stop save. It's not our duty to save this gender binary, to save Western conceptualizations. Like, it's not our job. Like, we can wash our hands of this of the binary. We don't have to continue like that. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a hard time. I mean, it is going to be a hard time, but I think it's we have leeway, we have room to maneuver and to tell people the truth. At least I feel like we already exist out of the binary, because we don't have the majority of, if we're saying like working, maybe people who are classed, you know, especially classically, yes, they do try to exist within the binaries and reinforce the binaries, because for their own survival, they need that. But if the masses of us are working poor or working people, then they already exist outside of the binaries. This is not news to them, at least in my opinion. That's how I feel. Hello.
I don't know if anybody else has any questions. I don't have any question. I just say it was again, I enjoyed the way it's been done, and just like last time. So that's my own feedback. So so that's it. But if others have questions, they should come in.